Hello, and welcome to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast on today, Monday, April 21st. Like always, I'm your host, Jake Daly. We got a good show for you today. Going to talk a little bit about Nico Iamaleava officially committing to UCLA, the fallout about that. Also going to talk a little bit about college football playoff. Leaders are meeting this week to discuss automatic bids, for the most part, a couple other things, but that's really the big talking point for this week. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Also going to preview a couple of Big 12 teams in the Cincinnati Bearcats and the Utah Utes today, break down their rosters, positions of strength, weakness, how they're looking for the upcoming season, and make sure you stick around for my last segment today when I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the options that could potentially replace Nico at Tennessee. But before we get into all that, I just want to remind everyone that this show is all about you. Whether you have a quick comment, a question, just any kind of hot take, anything you need to get out, we would love to hear it. An easy way to do that, make sure you get noticed, is to use the Super Chat feature. Just go ahead to the bottom of the chat box, click the $sign to send in your Super Chat there. This ensures that your comment or question gets on the air, gets live. Also, it's just a great way to support our channel here at GSMC. We cannot do what we do without your support, and we are so grateful to have you as a part of our community here at GSMC, just so we can keep bringing you more of the sport content, more of the sports updates that you love. So, Nico Iamaleava officially has announced his commitment to UCLA. I honestly kind of saw this move coming as soon as he entered the portal, but it's one that makes a lot of sense for him, I think for UCLA as well. This is a move that automatically improves their quarterback room, gives them a upper tier starter. I don't know. I wouldn't classify Nico as an elite starter, but definitely an upper tier starter to try to compete in the Big Ten. One of the things that I'm really looking at here is how UCLA is actually affording to pay Nico. So UCLA, this has kind of been a story with them for a while, that they basically said they don't really have a lot of money for NIL deals, stuff like that, of that nature, kind of in the athletic collective world, athletic departments. UCLA has kind of claimed that they don't really have a strong budget right now. They don't have a really deep, well-established collective that kind of can offer these NIL deals for these athletes. So that's one big component here. Also, just the new NIL legislation that's about to be in place. This gives players more leverage, more negotiation tactics. But in this particular situation, I think UCLA actually did have the advantage. There weren't a ton of landing spots for Nico that made a lot of sense, especially considering the timing of everything. When you think of the spring portal, most teams, pretty much every team, already has an established starting quarterback, or they have two or three guys that are competing for that role that they think could fill it out in the future. This is not a time to get a starting quarterback, and it really limited Nico's options, especially because he couldn't transfer within the SEC. That's one of the SEC's main rules, is during the spring portal, athletes cannot transfer in the conference. So they can't go from a Tennessee to an Ole Miss or to an LSU. That's just something that the SEC doesn't like. It's one of their conference rules. So right away, that knocks out 15 teams. Then you go down the list of teams that have established starters, teams that have paid guys, teams that have brought transfers in. That list really, really shrank for potential landing spots for Nico Iamaleava. So the leverage here was really with UCLA. They did have kind of an opening spot. Joey Aguilar, they brought in from Appalachian State, who I'm actually going to talk a little bit about later because he has now officially re-entered the portal. So that was honestly probably their biggest transfer addition to up to this point, was bringing in a different quarterback. But there weren't a lot of really great landing spots for Nico. Obviously, not a ton of the Big Ten teams, besides UCLA, really needed an established starter. One of the teams that they kind of mentioned was Oregon. That never really made a lot of sense to me. But I'm really curious here about how they're going to pay him. So, according to The Athletic, too, the UCLA athletic department has spent $200 million more than it has brought in over the past 5 fiscal years. So, they're operating at a loss right now in the athletic department, and that how are they going to be operating at a loss while also bringing in a really high-profile quarterback transfer? Their football ticket sales were 15th out of 16 public universities in the Big Ten last season, and their previous media rights deal with the Pac-12, it was about 2/3 less of what the Big Ten got this season. So they're kind of operating at a financial deficit. How did they find the money here? I wonder if it was just a collective, if there's a big donor from the school that tossed that money towards Nico. This is also kind of an interesting on-the-field fit for UCLA. Last year, UCLA offense was a disaster. They were 95th out of 134 FBS teams in terms of yards per play. They were 126th, so one of the bottom 10 offenses in the country in terms of scoring. Only scored 18.4 points per game. Rushing attack also was really weak for the Bruins this season. They only averaged 3.1 yards per rush, were the 128th rushing offense in the country. And then they also gave up 34 sacks. So across the board, offensive line wasn't strong. Running game wasn't great. Total offense was not where they wanted it to be. And then also most of the guys that kind of stood out from that skill group positions, they're gone now too. J. Michael Sturtevant, he's leaving. Logan Loya is also leaving. TJ Harden also leaving. So these guys are all out of the program, and those are some of the bright spots of the UCLA offense last season. It was bad enough. Eric Bieniemy, who, offensive coordinator for the Chiefs, Commanders, really well-respected name. He only got a year at UCLA. He's out as the offensive coordinator now. O-line coach Juan Castillo also was in his first year last season. He's out too. So you have two coaches that are out after year one of running that offense. This is going to be a really interesting unit to watch, to look at. I kind of think they're still going to struggle, but they're trying to remake their offense through the portal right now. So they added Mikey Williams, they added Jaden Wilson, two receivers that are kind of supposed to be at that forefront of the UCLA passing attack. But those two guys, between the two, they only have 79 career catches between those two wide receivers, which that's like a good season for a really great wideout. Only 79 career catches, so they haven't really proven themselves. Even though they're expected to be two of the main guys, this is going to be up for debate, up for question. We're not really sure. They also brought in a running back transfer, Anthony Woods. He was from Idaho. He was a productive player there. Between 2022-2023, rushed for over 2,000 rushing yards in total, had 19 touchdowns. He did transfer to Utah last year, actually. Didn't really play a lot, though. Had kind of an injury-plagued season. Didn't get a single carry for Utah last year. So that's going to be another guy coming into UCLA, but is he going to be more of the 2022-2023 version of himself, or more of the 2024 Utah version who didn't get a carry? I think that's going to be interesting to look at. Also, they brought in 4 offensive line transfers this offseason. So clearly need to remake the offensive line after being 107th in the country in terms of sacks allowed. That's obviously a unit that needs to be remade. And so I'm kind of curious how that's going to work out when you have a group that you bring in 4 transfers. Will that work out? Obviously, offensive line is a position group that needs chemistry, requires a ton of it. So how are you going to kind of rework that room with all those new faces in? People try this all the time. Programs try it all the time. Some succeed. A lot fail, though. So how is that remaking of the offensive line? Will it help? And again here, Nico, his main reasoning, allegedly, and everything that his kind of family has said is that he wanted to get out of Tennessee because of the offensive situation there, because of the skill group, because of questions on the offensive line. He wanted to get away from all of that. So it's kind of curious, though, that, that's your reasoning for leaving Tennessee, but the place that Nico actually ends up at has more offensive line questions, has less skill talent just across the board at wide receiver, tight end, running back, across the board, less skill position talent, not as much experience on the O-line, even more turnover on the O-line. How does that kind of correlate? In my head, it doesn't really, but maybe there is something that he saw in Heupel's offense that they didn't like. I think this is probably more of a financially driven transfer, but my thing there too is, do we really think that Nico Iamaleava is going to make more money at UCLA than at Tennessee? He was scheduled to make over $2 million, about $2.25 up to $2.4 reportedly. Is UCLA gonna actually give him that money? I have serious questions about that. I have serious doubts about that. I don't think they have the capability to pay him that much. So if it's financially driven too, there's questions there. This is really just an interesting situation overall. We've never seen anything like it on the college level. But both of his kind of reasonings for transferring, allegedly, there's holes in those arguments, I would say. Definitely from an on-field perspective, UCLA is a weaker program than Tennessee is. There's no debate, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Tennessee, this has been an offense for the past 3 to 4 years that has been one of the top offenses in the country, and UCLA has not. They have not. So I think that's going to be really interesting to look at here. What actually happens? What does this offense actually look like at UCLA? What does this team look like at UCLA? Had a really rough year last year. And the other thing is, did Nico actually improve his situation at all? I kind of argue that he did not improve his situation. The one way I could see that this is actually an improvement overall is potentially just looking at draft stock. Do NFL scouts look more at Nico when he goes to UCLA because of less talent across the board, less talent around him, a different offensive scheme? If he produces, could that be, helpful for his draft stock? I think that's another kind of question mark in this whole transfer decision for Nico Iamaleava. But we're going to see how it goes. We're going to see how it looks. I don't know if UCLA is going to be back up there, but they definitely got a lot more interesting for this upcoming season. So now we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about automatic bids, the college football playoff, just what's going to happen with that. So we will be back shortly on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Network. On this Monday, April 21st, just talked a little bit about Nico to UCLA. Gonna switch topics, talk a little bit about the college football playoff format, what's going on there. But first, before we get into that, I just want to remind everyone that if you have a comment, question, opinion that you just want to share, we would love to hear it. The show is all about you. It's about making your voice heard, and we want to make this as interactive, as exciting as possible. So one good way to do that is to use the Super Chat feature. Just go ahead to the bottom of the chat box, click the $sign to send in your Super Chat. It's a great way to ensure that your comment gets on the air, and also just a fantastic way to support our channel. We rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content that you love, and we are so grateful for every single moment of it, each and every day. We love having all of the support that we can get here at GSMC. So I want to talk a little bit about the automatic bids. Came out this morning. Heather Dinich reported that the college football playoff leaders, commissioners, athletic directors, they are expected to meet again this week to kind of discuss more of the seeding for the playoff, the format, as well as potentially automatic bids. So the one thing I want to look at here is kind of the adjustments would impact who actually receives first round buys, and would also impact the payout for those specific teams. Last season, Boise State, Arizona State, they were impacted the most financially. Because of those buys, they were able to get the $4 million that each college football playoff team gets just for getting into the playoff. And they were also able to get that extra $4 million because of the bye, because they're already in the quarterfinals at that point. That obviously was a big boon for those two programs, but this might be changing. So they're still discussing whether it's going to be a 12 or 14 team playoff. That won't happen this upcoming season. That's going to be a 2026 football season kind of implementation if they do change anything. It's not going to change this year, though. But in one of those models, and kind of both of the models, they're possibly talking about adding automatic bids. And one way that might look would be the SEC and Big Ten each have 4 teams, so that's 8, 2 teams apiece for the ACC and the Big 12, so then you're at 10. And then you would get one automatic bid from the group of 5, as well as one at-large spot, which honestly is probably there for Notre Dame on the years that they're in contention for the playoff, which honestly is most years. I think it's kind of interesting. I'm not a huge fan personally of automatic bids, but specifically because I think college football playoff, college football in general, kind of the conferences shift from year to year. Strength of teams change every single year. One year you could have a conference that has 5 or 6 or 7, potential playoff teams. The next year, that same conference could have 2 playoff teams. I I think that's one thing to look at. Obviously, though, the depth of the SEC, the Big Ten, it makes sense that those two conferences want 4 automatic bids. It would make sense for them. And those two commissioners, Greg Sankey, Tony Petitti, they're really driving this conversation. The SEC and the Big Ten has all the negotiating power here. They have the most influence. That's been set up, though, since the last deal that the College Football Playoff made. It basically put the SEC and the Big Ten in the driver's seat for all the decisions that are going to come out of the College Football Playoff, the meetings that they're having, potentially even Florida State. If all those schools have a year where they have a really great season, those are 4 teams that could potentially make the playoff. That could be something where the ACC does not want automatic bids because those 4 teams would not all be in the playoff, right? You'd only have 2, and you wouldn't want that. But just the volatility, I think, of college football in general, if you're a smaller school, if you're a smaller conference, it doesn't really make sense to want automatic bids, especially if you're a group of 5 program. If you think of, last season, there are a couple group of 5 teams that were kind of right up there. Could we see a year, and it's always possible, could we see a year where there's 2 group of 5 teams in the top 12 in the country? I mean, you never know, right? Especially if it's like a Tulane and an Army or something like that, where it's Boise State and Tulane, some of these bigger group of 5 programs, they could do it potentially on a year-to-year basis. So if you're a smaller program, why would you want automatic bids? I don't really think it makes a lot of sense there. Another thing they're talking about right now is just the voting process, I guess, and kind of how they determine rankings, how they go about putting these teams out. It's kind of been not under question, under fire a little bit, but because any change right now to the playoff format, it requires unanimous approval, but after 2025, that ban is lifted, so that's why the SEC and the Big Ten are really in the driver's seat at that point. They can basically implement their own rules without a full consensus up to that point. So, but there's still kind of a desire to modernize how they vote on teams. They want to make it a little more statistics-based, computer model-based. However, this is not a reverting back to the BCS model. Nobody really wants that. They still want to have, humans making that decision, but this could be something where we see a little bit more statistics, a little bit more modeling in kind of how these teams are determined, which I think makes sense. Some of the decisions from the committee over the past couple of years have definitely been questioned. Florida State, Alabama, that really comes to mind for me. And then last year, especially too, with just that last playoff spot and, the 3 SEC teams kind of all in contention, and South Carolina, Alabama, Ole Miss. Obviously, they all missed, but that could be those situations could be somewhere where, statistics trying to helps inform a decision a little more, helps drive what's happening in that conversation. This is going to be interesting, though. I'm really curious to see what kind of happens with automatic bids. Another reason they kind of want automatic qualifiers would be there would basically be playoff games or play-in games. So if you think about if the SEC, Big Ten both have 4 teams each, take the Big Ten, for example. So your top 2 teams are going to be playing in that conference championship. They're obviously going to be in the playoff. So say you have Oregon, Ohio State, right? And then how that would work then is you have teams 3 through 6 are going to play 2 games to determine those last 2 spots. So you'd have the 3rd team in the conference, say Penn State, against the 6th team in the conference. We'll go Nebraska. So those 2 teams, and then the 4 and 5 teams in the conference, say Michigan, Indiana. So Michigan plays Indiana, Penn State plays Nebraska to determine than who is in those last two playoff spots. It is kind of an exciting concept having playoff games in college football. Obviously, the NBA has done it the past few seasons, has really kind of worked out for them just in that regard. I think it'd be interesting to look at from a college football point of view, but it's definitely something that is being considered right now. Something we're going to hear more about is potentially having these playoff games, potentially having automatic bids, and we're going to see what happens. I'm not a huge fan personally. I do kind of like the idea, though, if they are going to do automatic bids, I do like the idea of a play-in game, playoff kind of format. That's pretty fun to me. I think that's a good idea, but we're going to see what happens. Big Ten, SEC, obviously are driving this conversation right now and will in the near future. So we're going to take another short break on the GSMC College Football Podcast. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the Cincinnati Bearcats, their upcoming season. What's going to happen for them in the Big 12 this year? So we're going to take another break, and we'll be back shortly on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast. On today, Monday, April 21st, just talked a little bit about Nico Iamaleava, as well as the potential of automatic bids in the college football playoff. Now we're going to switch gears. We're going to do another season preview, and this time we're going to talk about the Cincinnati Bearcats. So, obviously, Cincinnati had a rough season last year, went 5-7 overall, 3 in conference, 3-6 in Big 12 conference play. So, not a great season. This is going to be year 3, I believe, under head coach Scott Satterfield, who took over after Luke Fickell left for Wisconsin. Going to be a couple key storylines here. So one of the big pieces is Cincinnati's completely revamping their special teams unit. Did not have great special teams last season, just across the board. So they're getting everybody out, bringing in new punter, new kicker, new returners, everything. Max Fletcher, he's going to take back over as the punter. He had 2023 he punted, but did not punt last season. So, going to take back over there. Steven Rusnak is going to be, they brought in at kicker, transferred from Charlotte. He was actually perfect on field goals last season in 2024. So, we'll see if he can carry that over into the Big 12 this season. Kerry Coombs, he's gone, longtime coordinator there. So, this could be a big change just overall on how that unit kind of works. Another place I'm looking at is their running back spots. So Corey Kiner's gone, had a couple hundred carries last season, big piece of that offense. So this is basically going to be open competition, though. Tawi Walker, who transferred in from Wisconsin, he is probably going to take the lead role, expected to kind of be the main back there. Chance Williams will also be in contention. And then there's Evan Pryor. Evan Pryor's really explosive player. Averaged 7.5 yards per carry last season. The only thing to look at with Pryor is he's really got a small frame, slight frame. So they kind of want to utilize him while still, giving him a decent workload, but not overloading him, not getting him hurt. that's going to be kind of interesting to see how they utilize Evan Pryor, because he obviously has the talent, has the ability to make some big plays, just explosive player for the Bearcats. He's going to be a guy that they're going to have to try to work around limitations, but when he's on the field, that's an exciting guy to watch. Also brought in a couple different coaches, Brad Glenn, Tyson Veit, just changed up their coaching staff a little bit, not a ton, but this is going to be an interesting spot. Restructuring their offensive line a little bit. So center Gavin Gerhardt, he's there. He's almost a coach for Cincinnati. Really a veteran leader on that offensive line. Has been there for 4 or 5 years now, and has started, for the most part, pretty much that entire time. Be a kid that's really going to be a leader on that offensive line. They also brought in Taryn Tayo. He's Ball State transfer. He was actually a center at Ball State, probably expected to shift over to guard. He did take a couple snaps at center in their spring game. I'm going to go over that in a minute. Left guard, it's also kind of contested right now. Evan Tangisdal as well as Jake Wheelock, they're both kind of in contention there. DeAndre Buford, he's still in the mix at tackle as well. Had some struggles over the past season, but still a name to look at there. Spring game wise, this was really interesting. They had their spring game last weekend. Defense really looked strong, outperforming the offense. Brendan Sorsby, who is the starting quarterback for Cincinnati, going to be their starter again in 2025. He had 3 drives, did not lead the offense on a scoring drive on any of them. So this is clearly a defensive-led team at this point in their offseason, in their training regimen. The defense is leading the way right now for that unit. DN Rob Jackson, he had a tackle for loss. Daniel James broke up a pass. Tatum Barnes also had a pick and second pick of that week. But this is going to be a team, a unit that's going to be a little bit better, I think, than people realize. The backup quarterback, Brady Lichtenberg, he looked pretty good, actually. Had a touchdown pass to Jeff Caldwell. Chance Williams, also, who's probably going to be that third back, but could potentially be a more of a number 2 back. He had a 45-yard touchdown run. And the new kicker, actually, Steven Rusnak, had multiple kicks beyond 45 yards that he drilled. Hopefully bringing a little stability to that position. But this is going to be a really interesting group. Had a tough season last year. Really, Cincinnati's kind of been in a rut since Luke Fickell left. Has just in terms of players, in terms of kind of the scheme, as well as they jumped up to the Big 12 during that time. So, you have the transition time, and then you add in that time where you're in a brand new conference, you're in a power conference. That's going to be a big adjustment, especially after you lose some of your guys. But, it's not all doom and gloom in Cincinnati. Brendan Sorsby is back. He's really kind of been optimistic about this upcoming season, highlighted the team's growth, the new talent across the board, and just the importance of building on that season in the Big 12, kind of those experiences, taking them in and using them to improve for this upcoming season. He didn't have a bad year last year. Had 2,800 passing yards, 18 passing touchdowns, 7 interceptions, not great but not terrible. Completed 64% of his passes, but also was a dual threat guy, had 440 rushing yards, 9 rushing touchdowns on the season, so able to use and extend plays with his legs. But that's going to be a big thing for Brendan Sorsby this season, is just his ability to use his legs, extend plays. How they're going to kind of mesh on that offensive line remains to be seen. But the presence of Brendan Sorsby coming back for another year as a starter, that's really going to be key for this Cincinnati team. Gavin Gerhardt also kind of talked about he's got an extra year of eligibility this season, and he's really kind of said he's using it to mentor younger players, strengthen the cohesion across the offensive line, and that's going to be what he's going to do. He's going to be the anchor of that O-line. Everything's going to kind of move through him. But the fact that he is back for another season, that's really, really big for Cincinnati. Dante Corleone's another guy I'm looking at more on the defensive side of the ball, D-tackle, from Coleraine, which is right Cincinnati High School. So stayed home to play for the Bearcats, and really has kind of rewarded them. Has been an all-conference selection multiple times over his career. This past season was all Big 12 first team. Honestly, did not have as great of a season statistically in 2024 as he had in 2022 or 3, but still really strong performer. 26 total tackles, 3.5 sacks. Guy's got over 100 tackles on his career as a defensive tackle, which is really impressive. But that's going to be a main guy to look at for that defense there, and right in the middle. The anchors of these lines are right in the middle of them for Cincinnati, and Gavin Gerhardt and Dante Corleone. Another guy that's really going to be key for Cincinnati this season. Another local product from Archbishop Moeller, is tight end Joe Royer. Joe Royer. But Joe Royer going to come back again this season. Going to be the main target probably for Cincinnati. Really kind of has highlighted the improved chemistry between him and Sorsby, and just noting their progress in their on-field connections since last season, kind of how they've grown. He was an all Big 12 first team guy as well last season. 50 catches, 530 receiving yards, only had 3 touchdowns, so that's a number that could be improved upon this upcoming season, but going to be probably the main target for Cincinnati this upcoming season. Going to be a guy that Sorsby's going to look at as a security blanket, as a safety option, especially in those third and short, kind of third and medium scenarios. Joe Royer going to be a guy to watch for Cincinnati. Looking at their schedule, they open the season with Nebraska, which is kind of interesting. Obviously, a non-conference matchup. That's going to be at Arrowhead, home of the Kansas City Chiefs. So neutral site game there. Going to be a tough one for Cincinnati. It's also going to be a Thursday night game, which is interesting. I don't love when college football plays on Thursday night, but that's my own point of view. Iowa State is at home this season. That's a really solid matchup for them. They do have to play at Utah. I think Utah is going to be much improved this season. Also have to go to Stillwater and play Oklahoma State, who also struggled last year. But I think Mike Gundy can right the ship there. Going to be much more competitive than they were this past season. They do have BYU at home, which that's really great for them. Struggled last season. BYU is going to be another contender for the Big 12 championship. I think they're going to have another really good year this upcoming season, but we'll see. And then TCU, they finish at TCU. TCU quietly won 9 games last season. Going to be better than people think. So this Cincinnati team, though, it's going to be another tough go for them, I think. The key here is try, I think, around 500, 7-5, potentially 8-4 if things kind of fall the right way. But I think that's probably going to be the ceiling for Cincinnati this season, is an 8-4 type season. But this is a team that, could improve and make a little bit more noise in the Big 12 than some people might think. So we're going to take another break on the show. When we come back, going to talk a little bit about Utah and the Utes and what's going on with their season. So we will be back shortly on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast. Just talked a little bit about Cincinnati. Gonna switch gears, stay in the Big 12 though, and talk a little bit about Utah and what their upcoming season could look like. Had a tough season last year. We're expected to be kind of Big 12 contenders. I had quarterback issues throughout the year, started multiple guys, so was not the season that Utah was expecting or hoping for. But they're hoping to bounce back this upcoming season, and I think they have the roster to really make a jump back up into contention for the Big 12. At quarterback, the big story here is Cam Rising, officially gone out of eligibility. Had been there. It seems like he had been there for like 8 years, but had only been there for 4 or 5. Led them to consecutive Pac-12 championships, kind of was one of the main players throughout program history, one of the most successful. That's going to be a big hole, big gap to fill, but there's going to be a couple guys. So the big name here is Devin Dampier, transferring in from New Mexico. This was kind of their big target at the quarterback position. Projected starter. I would be kind of surprised if he does not start. Had 2,700 passing yards last season, as well as 1,200 rushing yards. First team All-Mountain West quarterback. Just the dual threat capability, and he's also pretty familiar with new offensive coordinator Jason Beck and his system. So the dual threat ability, the familiarity, just the pedigree. This should be the guy at quarterback for them. Backing up Dampier, probably going to be Brendan Zerberg is going to be the primary backup. He was an Oklahoma transfer, redshirt freshman, but he kind of had a really great high school career. Didn't play at all at Oklahoma. Had over 2,300 pass yards, over 1,000 rush yards as a senior in high school. Probably going to be the main backup. Another guy to look at, Nate Johnson is back, former Utah quarterback, left Utah to go to Vanderbilt, left Vanderbilt to come back to Utah. So Nate Johnson, though, he might switch positions. He's a really athletic guy, could have multiple roles for Utah this upcoming year at quarterback, wide receiver, running back as well. Just He might be kind of the Braxton Miller type guy where they switch positions about 2 or 3 years in their college career. I could see that for Nate Johnson. Really athletic dude, though. And he's probably going to play at some point across the board for Utah. Don't know really where, but going to be a guy that will play for them. Isaac Wilson, younger brother of Zach Wilson, is also there. Did play a decent chunk last season for Utah, but he's probably going to redshirt this year, just with the quarterbacks coming in, with not as many injuries. Shouldn't really be a name to look out for this season. Running back wise, Wayshawn Parker, that's going to be your main guy, it looks like this season. Coming in from Washington State, had 700 rushing yards last season, 4 touchdowns, only had 130 carries, so still had a pretty solid yards per carry average. Had 11 catches, 100 yards, receiving touchdown, in Washington's shoot and run kind of offense. But this is a bruising coach, bruising running style, 5'10", 210 about, so compact frame. And he's probably going to be the leader in the backfield there. Naquari Rogers is another guy that could be in the mix. from New Mexico. Also kind of has that familiarity from Jason Beck's scheme, as well as that rapport with Devin Dampier. Those are going to be assets. He's got a little bit of pass catching experience as well. 25 receptions over 2 seasons at Campbell. So another guy that could kind of mix in there. And then Daniel Berry's a freshman who could be a change of pace guy. The big thing here is his speed. Ran a 10.38 100-meter dash in high school and averaged over 8.5 yards per carry as a senior. So could be a guy that gets a role just because of his speed. Pass catching wise, wide receiver is a really big question mark here. Not a ton of guys. Dorian Singer's also gone. Otto Tia, Justin Stevenson, Creed Whittemore, they're all kind of names to watch for playing time here. But this is a spot where it's going to be determined in camp and probably in the early weeks of the season who actually ends up playing, who gets catches and targets for Utah is going to be a big question mark. Tight end's a little more kind of set. Landon King should be the starter there. Had a rough season last year, had some conditioning issues, and then also the quarterback instability, never really got going, but had a really strong 2023 season. So King is trying to get back to that kind of 2023 performance and level of expectation. But he's expected to be kind of the main guy, should be a key player in the system, and a key target for Devin Dampier. Dallin Bentley, also going to be another guy. He played in all 12 games last year. Not a ton of stats-based info for Dallin Bentley, but still reliable, able to move well throughout the scheme. That's going to be a guy to look at. Offensive line, this is going to be a really big strength for Utah. They're going to return all 5 starters this season. Spencer Fano, that's the big name. First team All-American this past season by PFF. Started 24 of 25 career games. He's going to go back to the right side of the line, play right tackle there. Kind of had to move a little bit, but right side is his natural side, natural position. So that's going to be a really big name and returning starter for them. They're Jaron Kump, also going to be a guy to look at, most seasoned player, 47 career games, 29 starts, and last member of the 2018 recruiting class, which is unbelievable that he has that many years of eligibility. Pretty crazy. But probably going to be the center, most experienced guy, going to be a good voice there. Caleb Lomu started every game at left tackle last season. Going to be a guy to look out for as in year 2 as a starter at that spot. Tanoa Togiai is going to be left guard most likely. He played 10 games last year. And then Michael Mokafisi also has played 37 games, 33 career starts. Going to be another guy. He kind of had some injury setbacks last season, but should be back right on that line. This is going to be a really strong unit for Utah, and I think a lot of their success on the offensive side of the ball will be based on what these guys can do. D-line is kind of going to be an interesting spot for them. Van Fillinger, Connor O'Toole are both gone, so this is going to be a younger group. A lot of promise, though. A place where they're looking for guys to step in at that role. Logan Fano is going to be the sole upperclassman. He's the sole upperclassman among defensive ends, which I thought was really interesting. He's going to be the leader of this group. Had a torn ACL in 2023, but played all 12 games last season. 35 tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, a couple different other stats, but going to be the main guy. Paul Fitzgerald is another guy to look at here. Transferred him from Utah State. Had a really strong 2023 season, but didn't really play that much in 2024. So we'll see how this kind of shakes out, but could be a guy that gets probably the first crack at that starting DN role just because of his previous production at Utah State in that 23 season. John Henry Daly is another guy, BYU transfer, played in the last 7 games of last season, had 3 tackles in the season finale against UCF. Could be another guy that's kind of rising. Jackson Jones, another guy. And then D-tackle wise, Dallas Vakalahi is going to be probably the next guy up. Utah's got a long history of defensive tackles. Is going to be a true sophomore. Played in 9 games as a true freshman. Started 3 of them. Led all Utah freshmen with 16 total tackles. Had 5.5 third down stops. This is going to be the next guy up to look for. But another veteran presence as Aliki Vimahi, veteran of the group. He's a senior. By the end of his sophomore game, by the end of his sophomore year, he'd already started 11 total games. Since then, he's started in 2 games over the last 2 years, so hasn't played a lot. Only played 4 games during the 2024 season, but because of that, he took advantage of his red shirt. He redshirted last season, so this is going to be a guy that is the veteran on that defensive line and probably going to be one of the main guys at defensive tackle for them. Linebacker, again, this is going to be a really great unit for Utah. Pretty established line. So Levani Damuni, he's transferring in from Stanford, he did transfer in from Stanford. Had an immediate impact 2023, had 87 tackles, and then he was hurt for pretty much all last season, had a lower leg injury, but expected to come back and kind of reclaim that mantle, that position of being at the top of that linebacker unit. Lander Barton, this is going to be another guy, was 2022 Pac-12 Defensive Freshman of the Year, had an injury in 2023, but played all 12 games last season, had 72 tackles, defended 6 passes, had 2 interceptions, had a fumble recovery. This is going to be a really strong linebacker for Utah to kind of look out for. Then Jonathan Hall's another guy, former safety who converted down, but really aggressive player, 39 tackles, had a sack, had an interception, multiple pass breakups. He should be kind of the main guy when Utah is in 3 linebacker sets. Trey Reynolds is going to be another guy that could kind of rotate in after coming back and playing all 12 games last season. Could be another guy that kind of rotates in. Defensive back wise, safety's really the key spot here. Tao Johnson, probably the most talented guy, has 23 starts in 30 career games, has played both safety and nickel cornerback, so probably the most athletic player on the roster. Had 70 tackles last season, 5 pass breakups, scored a touchdown on a blocked field goal against Baylor. So just a really versatile playmaker, able to kind of move across positions. Rabbit Evans, probably going to be another guy, started 5 games last season after transferring in from Blinn. And then Nate Ritchie could be another dude to look at here. Schedule-wise, I think Arizona State, they have at home October 11th. They have to go play at BYU, at Provo this season. That's going to be a tough matchup. Then they have to go to Colorado. So this October stretch of Arizona State at BYU, Colorado, and then Cincinnati, I think could be kind of tough for them. Kansas State is going to be another game. They do have Kansas State at home. And then they have to go to UCLA week 1. I think that's going to be kind of an interesting matchup there. So it's going to be an interesting year for Utah. I think they have a really wide range in terms of how they can do in 2025. I think they can be anywhere from a 4-8, 5-7 team to a 9-3 team. It just kind of depends on how those Big 12 games kind of shake out, in my opinion, and what goes on. The Big 12 is kind of volatile, in my opinion. I think those games are always almost a toss-up. So just depending on if they get that right call in the last minute of a really close Big 12 game or not, I think could change how their season looks. Right now, we're going to take our last break of the show. When we come back, going to talk a little bit about some of the guys that could be options to replace Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee. So we're going to take our last break, and we'll be back shortly on the GSMC College Football Podcast. Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast on this Monday, April 21st. Just talked a little bit about Utah and the Utes this upcoming season. Gonna switch gears, talk a little bit about some of the top options to replace Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee. They do have two options, kind of still in the class. Jake Merklinger, George McIntyre, both still available as the starter, as potential options for Tennessee in-house replacements, but I think they're probably going to look to add somebody in the portal. One of the names that I'm looking at that I think could honestly make a lot of sense is actually the guy that's now leaving UCLA because of Nico Iamaleava, is Joey Aguilar. So Joey Aguilar last season played for Appalachian State, had a really strong year. In 2 seasons as a starter there, he started 24 games. In those 24 games, threw for 6,700 passing yards, 56 touchdowns, 24 interceptions, also ran for 450 yards and 5 touchdowns. So proven production at that level, playing in the Sun Belt for Appalachian State. And transferred to UCLA in December, was expected to kind of take over as their starter up until this news broke that Nico is in fact going to UCLA. Was kind of reportedly thinking about staying, but ultimately has entered the portal. He's the most experienced starter in the portal right now, most productive passer available. This is going to be the guy that, if you're looking at numbers, his are going to do the best. And he only has 1 year left, but honestly, Tennessee only really needs 1 year of a starting quarterback, especially with Faison Brandon coming in next season. Number 1 to number 3 quarterback in the country. Kind of depends on who's ranking him in that 26 class, but they really only need a guy for a year. Joey Aguilar could make a lot of sense. Another guy I think could make sense, got 2 years of eligibility left, is former Notre Dame quarterback Steve Angeli. So Steve Angeli only has 1 career start, but he's appeared in 21 games over the past 3 seasons. Obviously, most of that was kind of when Notre Dame already had the result locked up. But, you know, this was a guy that was primary backup to Sam Hartman, to Riley Leonard, but he was pressed into action in the college football playoff, in the semifinal against Penn State, in the one series where he did play against Penn State. He really had a decent series. Shook off a sack where he kind of fumbled the ball, but he drove Notre Dame into the red zone in the final 2 minutes, went 6-7 for 44 yards passing, and then Notre Dame did have a field goal, but this is kind of what you'd expect. His lone start was against Oregon State in 2023 in the Sun Bowl. Kind of showed a lot of the same. 15-19, 232 yards, 3 touchdowns. But he's not going to wow anyone. But this is a guy that's realistically probably good enough to be a starter at a Power 4 school and still has 2 years left. Probably wouldn't be super expensive for Tennessee to get. I think it makes a lot of sense as a potential landing spot for both Angeli and Tennessee. This could be a short-term marriage that works out for both of those, both Tennessee and Steve Angeli, respectively. Mike Wright, he's another option. I don't love Mike Wright as an option for Tennessee, but he's still there. This is going to be Mike Wright's 4th school now. Pretty well-traveled guy. Spent a couple years at Vanderbilt, then transferred to Mississippi State when they already had Will Rogers in 2023. That was a really interesting move. Then ended up joining Northwestern last season. Won the starting job in training camp, but was benched after he really struggled in their Week 2 loss to Duke. Has appeared in 42 games in his 5-year career, but he's never started more than 6 in a season, never attempted more than 175 passes in a season, so hasn't played consistently. Could be a guy that they look at. I kind of doubt it. I think he's only a 55% passer for his career. Does have some kind of running ability, just in terms of he's got 1,300 career rushing yards, so makes sense, but I don't really see that one as a true landing spot. Dylan Brisk, I think, is a guy that could make sense for Tennessee. UCF quarterback, and he's younger than most of these other guys that are in the portal. Still has 3 years remaining. Little less experience, but did start the last 4 games of the season for UCF this past year. Best game came on November 2nd when they blew out Arizona. He threw for 294 yards, had 3 touchdowns, also ran for 55 yards. Mostly kind of getting group of 5 attention right now, but if they want more of a guy that's going to be in that room for a couple years, I think Dylan Brisk could make a lot of sense for Tennessee. Another guy that, personally, I just think it'd be really funny if this happened would be Jaden Rashada. Jaden Rashada, obviously, I've kind of talked about him a little bit, but had the whole saga with Florida where he's suing them because of an NIL deal. Got out of that, went to Arizona State, started a few games at Arizona State before transferring to Georgia last season. Didn't really play for Georgia, was kind of sidelined for most of the season, but was buried on that depth chart. Could this be a guy where Tennessee maybe looks at him? I kind of doubt it. I think it'd be a really interesting option, though, just from the whole saga of, you got rid of Nico because of NIL deals, and Jaden Rashada also has his kind of own NIL saga, question mark, I guess. But still a talented quarterback, still a former 5-star quarterback. Would be kind of an interesting landing spot, though, for Jaden Rashada. But I'm really curious as to what Tennessee's going to do at quarterback. I think they don't really have a ton of options. Joey Aguilar, I think, makes a lot of sense for them if they're looking at a guy that's experienced that they only want for a year. That's, I think, makes the most sense. It'd be kind of funny if he then went to Tennessee after Nico went to UCLA, almost like a little trade. But you never know. This is going to be a storyline, though, to follow, to watch, is just what's Tennessee going to do at that quarterback position. What's going to happen? How are they going to replace Nico? That's going to be a big thing to look out for here in Knoxville, and just over the next week or so, what's going to happen. I'm not really sure, but it'll be fun to find out and watch, though. So, with that being said, we are going to end our show for today. thank you so much for tuning into the GSMC College Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Network. Please remember to like, subscribe to the show. And if you want more sports content, more updates, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, for even more of the sport content that you love, that we love giving you. So, thank you so much, and have a great day.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.